Welcome to Book Club. I am trying to pre-record a live stream, and everything about that sounds like it contradicts itself to me. But we're going to try it. I'm told you can do it. I'm going to pre-record the reading, and then I think I can put it up as a regular live stream on Wednesday, since we're going to be out of town camping. But I didn't want to miss a week on the reading. So we are starting in Chapter 4 of The Pioneers by Jack Schaefer, and Chapter 4 is called My Town. And each chapter, if you've missed before, each of the chapters is standalone. They're just short stories, so you haven't missed anything. Well, you have, but you're not behind in the story. All right. Make sure we got our volume right here. My Town. Ask pardon, gents, but heard you talking. Seems a strange boasting about cemeteries, the Boot Hill brand, now in my town. Me? Nobody much, just a lonesome passing through, plain and peaceable. Always get to wondering when talk swings around to towns and how many in each catch lead poisoning a-wearing their outdoor boots. Always wonder why burying's cause for boasting. About a town's toughness, that is. Seems silly. Take my town now, not much of a place, but the toughest town its size, this side the devil's fireplace. More shooting there than in all your towns together. But no folks being planted, all enjoying life too much. One man's responsible. No, two men. Have to divvy it between them, but one's a mite more responsible than the others. That one's Samuel J. L. Cleggett, our sheriff. Sandber, we call him. Samber Sam Claggett. Started calling him that a time back because when he goes after a man, he sticks to the trail like a sandbur to a mule's tail. Come to think of it, he hasn't done much trailing for quite a stretch now. No need to. Folks in my town behave sensible, that is. No one wants old sandbur sticking to his trail. Now, a man like that can do things with a 6-gun you wouldn't believe, not having seen him do them. He's long and lies lean and kind of double-jointed all over, and he's about the gentlest and kindliest man you'd bump into in a month's riding, and the toughest. Maybe not quite the last. Wilbur Morriston Burton is plenty tough, too. He's the other man. Black Ace, he's called. Black Ace Burton. Can see you've heard of him. Most folks have. Maybe don't know the Wilbur Morriston part, but when they hear the Black Ace, they tremble. They tumble. Probably wonder why tales about him aren't running anymore. That's because he's living in my town, plain and peaceable, like the rest of us. Used to be about the fastest gunfighter ever to hit these territories. Still is. Fast as old Sandbur himself. Still doing plenty of shooting, but not the kind you'd hear about. Yep, all this starts the day Black Ace rides into town. He rides in, big and brawny on his horse, with that black stubble scratching around his chin, and looks the place over and doesn't think much of it. He meanders into Willie Lord's saloon and soaks up a few. Reaches in his pocket where he carries his silver, and the pocket's empty, bottom frayed out. Cusses some and tells Willie, wait a minute, he'll go get some cash. Willie's heard the cussing and seen the 2 big guns hanging down his flanks, so Willie says forget it. The drinks are on the house. No, Black Ace says. He's not particular about some kind of debts, but a drinking debt is one he always honors. He meanders out and looks the place over again and meanders into the little frame bank building. Tells the clerk there he needs some cash, and his name being Black Ace, he figures he won't have much trouble getting it. The clerk hears the name and looks around wild and sees there's no one else handy and drops quiet in a faint on the floor. Black Ace is a mite peeved at having to go around behind into the wire cage himself, but does so and scoops up what he wants. Meanders back to the saloon and pays Willie and out to his horse, and rides on. It's maybe 20 minutes later the clerk has come to and run to the sheriff's office and waked Sandbur Sam out of his early afternoon nap, and Sandbur has strapped on his own guns and hit the trail. Black Ace is easing along casual when he sees Sandbur's dust back along a loop. Hell, he tells himself, being as there's only one of them, the only way he can have fun out of this is make it a race. He larrups his horse and skitters off into the hills, and old Sandbur, catching the scent, swings his quirt and skitters after him. They have themselves a time for maybe 2 hours, tearing up the landscape, working deep into the hills where the big rocks climb, playing hide and seek all over the rough ground. So busy skittering around, they don't know they're not the only two-legged critters in the neighborhood. Black Ace can't shake Sandbur and finally gets tired chasing around. Enough's enough, he tells himself. Too bad having to knock over a man can stick after him like that, but he can't play games all day. Picks a spot and drops off his horse and waits where he figures old Sandbur will have to come at him straight, and it'll be a square scuffle. But Sandbur's an old hand at this kind of business, too. He's stopping now and again to listen. Notes the other horse has quit running, so he drops off his horse and slips in among the boulders on foot. Moves so quiet Black Ace can't hear him, and Black Ace gets restless and slips in among the boulders himself. Same thing. He moves so quiet old Sandbur can't hear him. Hard to believe, but those two are so eternal damned good at slipping around quiet, they spend maybe half an hour in and around those boulders without once tagging each other. Both get to thinking the same, that the other's gone. Both holster their guns and start back where they left their horses. Sandbur's up higher among the boulders and tries to shortcut over a big one and skids and comes coasting on his rump and bounces and lands flat on his back not 10 feet behind Black Ace, who whirls quick, and there are two mighty surprised men a-staring at each other in a hollow among those boulders. Old Sandbur is stretched out, spread eagle, looking along his own length and over his boot toes at Black Ace, and Black Ace is looking down over those same boot toes at Sandbur's lean old face. They're caught like that for a second of surprise, and in another tiny tick of time, those two, maybe the fastest gunfighters ever slapped leather, might be blazing at each other, but in that same second, there's a rapping sound, and an arrow bounces off a boulder close to Black Ace, and lots of whoops whistle in the air, and more arrows are whopping around, and in a flash of movement, that's a dead heat for them. Those two, maybe the fastest gunfighters ever wore boots, are showing their skill in another kind of action. They're side by side behind boulders, and they're talking back to the arrows in a right hearty gunshot tune. It isn't really a fair fight. There's only 23 of the Redskins. Could be why old Sandbur and Black Ace never talk much about that scuffle. Doesn't take 'em long. There's a moment when a Redskin pokes up quick way over to the right, and Sandbur sights him out the corner of his right eye and flicks his right handgun around without seeming to aim, and that Redskin rubs a dead nose in the dirt. Nice, Black Ace says. Very nice. There's another moment when another Redskin behind a rock gets careless and lets a foot show a fraction of a second, and Black Ace nicks it, and that makes the Redskin jump, and his head bobs up about 2 inches over the rock and down again, and has a hole in it when it goes down. Pretty, old Sandbur says. Very pretty. They're really beginning to enjoy themselves when the 4 redskins left alive fade off, glad to go. Black Ace turns his guns up and blows the smoke out the barrels and looks at Sandber, and Sandber does the same and looks at him, and they both grin. But Black Ace's grin dwindles. Disappointed, he says. Saw you miss one. When he peeked around that flat rock there, missed by 2 feet, saw that other rock beside there chip where your bullet hit. Old Sandber just chuckles. Certain it chipped, he said. Meant it to hit there. Had to bounce it off that second rock to get it around behind the first one and drill 'em where it'd count. Black Ace grunts. No, he says. I'm the only man can pull a stunt like that. Maybe you tried, but your angle was wrong. Old Sandber chuckles again. Wrong from where you're standing, he says. Not from here. There's a dead redskin behind that rock, shot through the left side about over the 4th rib. He leads the way over, and he's right, even to the rib, and Black Ace looks at him long. So there's 2 of us, Black Ace says. Too bad I've got to kill you. And old Sandber just chuckles again. Try to, you mean, he says. But that reminds me. How were we when this little interruption interrupted? Black Ace is reloading his guns. You were patting the ground with your backside, he says. Well, how'll we do this? Pace it off and arrange a signal? Old Sandber is reloading his guns, too. No, he says. Maybe I'm old-fashioned, but want things like this done right. Get over where you were when I landed. Black Ace is puzzled, but does as he's told. Sandber finds his own spot and lays down flat on his back and spraddles out his arms. This the way I was? He says. And Black Ace nods. All right, Sandber says. See that bird on that bush? When he pops off that branch, we'll both start fanning. Black Ace isn't anywhere near grinning now. You mean, he says, you're going to lie there and give me the advantage? Old Sandber isn't near grinning either. Certain I do, he snaps. This is the way I was. Black Ace is beginning to sweat some through the weather's cool. Maybe you don't know, he says. I'm Black Ace Burton. Sandber just shrugs his shoulders there on the ground, and Black Ace sweats more. You've heard of me, haven't you? He says, almost plaintive. Certain I have, Sandber snaps. Don't care if you're old Nick himself. Sweat is standing out plain on Black Ace's forehead. But I'll drill you, he says. You won't have a chance scrabbling against the dirt, old Sandber shrugs again. Maybe I won't, he says. Again, maybe I might. I'm right pert with the gun too, but if I go, I'll go right. Keep your eyes on that bird. It's getting restless. Yep, there they are. Sandber flat on his back and Black Ace standing facing him, and the bird is twiddling its feathers like it might take off any time, and sweat runs down Black Ace's face, and he groans, and sudden he reaches both hands high up over his head. Can't do it, he shouts. You confounded old he-buzzard, can't kill you, not like that. Old Sandbar pushes up till he's leaning on one elbow. Son, he says, are you surrendering to me? Black Ace looks surprised and then thoughtful. Reckon I am, he says. Can't see any other way out of this, you being so damn stubborn. It's Sandber's turn to look thoughtful. Can't take you in, he says. Can't lock up a man won't draw because he thinks it ain't square. Let's mosey to town and you hand back the money and we'll call it quits. Black Ace lowers his hands and hooks them in his belt. No, he says. Used part for a drinkin' debt. Need the rest for more the same till I get me another stake. Got it on the strength of my name and not giving it up. Old Sandburr snorts. Who's being stubborn now? He says. Gets to his feet and scratches an ear. Only one way out of that. You sign a note for the money, and that's still using the strength of your name, only a bit different way, and maybe the same because you being you, the bank won't dare refuse it. I'll put you on the payroll as a deputy till you've squared it off. Black Ace's jaw drops. Me? He says. Me be a sheriff's man? Sandburr snorts again. Certain, it ain't so bad. Another thing, you'll promise me not to use those guns on any man, less I give the word. Just till this is squared, of course. Black Ace snaps his jaw tight. No, he says. Now you're on your feet. Let's shoot this out fair. But old Sandburr flops quick again down on his back. Shoot it, he says. But it's got to be this way. There they are. Sandburr down and staring up, and Black Ace up and staring down. And sweat starts again on Black Ace's forehead, and he can't see any other way out, not with him being what he is, and this old buzzard what he is too. All right, Black Ace Burton says, and the words are bitter on his tongue, and his face is long and disgusted under the black stubble, all the while he and Sandburr find their horses and start toward town. They jog along, and Sandburr notes that disgusted look and worries over it, and after a time has an idea. He swoops down one side his saddle and picks up a plump little pebble. He holds the pebble so Black Ace can see it and tosses it in the air ahead. Black Ace watches it rise in the arc and start to fall, and sudden gets the notion. There's a blur of movement maybe an eagle might catch, but nothing else could. And a gun is in his right hand, and it blasts, and that pebble goes spinning crazy before it hits the ground. Black Ace drops the gun back in its holster and looks at Sandburr, and old Sandburr looks at him, and they both begin to grin, and they both hop off their horses and gather a handful of pebbles each and mount. Whenever Black Ace thinks Sandburr may be off guard, he tosses out a pebble, and Sandburr gives that funny little wriggle of his, and a gun seems to come out of the air into his hand, and the pebble takes a beating. The same happens whenever Sandburr tosses a pebble, and the two of them jog along enjoying themselves. First time either one has come on a man good as himself, and they get to showing off like a pair of colts. Black Ace gets tricky and whams a pebble twice before it hits ground, and whams it again there before it stops rolling, and old Sandburr lifts his eyebrows and worries a moment. Then he smiles and holds up 2 fingers, and when Black Ace tosses 2 pebbles at once, old Sandburr drops his reins and wriggles, and both his guns show, and he hits both pebbles simultaneous. They jog along grinning foolish at each other, and by time they reach town, each one knows he's found a man he'd stand back to back with against the whole eternal damned world. Yep, that's the way it starts. Black Ace fits into town in no time to bother over. Rest of us are a mite upset at first having him around, but get over that. Find he's quite soft-spoken gent, a lot like old Sandburr, long as nobody rubs him the wrong way. Only thing that shows the toughness inside is that black stubble around his chin. Doesn't shave it because he can't shave it. Razors nick too fast working at it. Can't keep it trimmed close even with scissors. Carries a small pair of wire cutters and uses them once a week, Sunday mornings. With him, there as deputy, folks behave even better than before. Town's quiet except for an hour each afternoon, right after old Sandbur's nap. He'll come out his office and look up Black Ace, and the two'll go into the big old barn standing empty behind Willie Lord's and close the doors. And for about an even 60 minutes, there'll be queer noises and bursts of shooting coming out of the place. Then the two'll walk out, grinning foolish at each other, and their holsters will have scorched look from having hot guns dropped back in them. Things drift like that till the day this smoke-eaten young gun-toter hits town. He's built like a young bull and has his hair cropped close over a hard, hatless head, and he wears 2 big guns low down along his flanks with the holster tips tied tight. Everything about him speaks toughness till you study him some and see he's younger than he seems, and he's worked long to get that tough look, and it ain't full natural yet. He's a maverick, hankers to be a gunfighter, and wants to get a reputation quick by knocking off somebody with a big name. That's plain soon as he struts into Willie Lord's and starts talking. "Here Black Ace Burton's hanging around here," he says to Willie. "That right?" Willie nods and points where Black Ace is sitting at a table dealing himself poker hands that always somehow give him the ace of spades. This young maverick squints his eyes at Black Ace and snorts and turns to the four, 5 rest of us there. "Name's Poison Pete," he says. "Poison Pete Humphrey. My folks gave me the Pete, but gave myself the poison. Know why? Because I'm poison to any galoot whose face I don't like, and I'll be cursed if I see anything to like about that black-whiskered baboon over there, likely cheating himself with those cards." Black Ace looks up, takes in this Poison Pete, looks back at his cards. "You hear me?" says Poison Pete, throwing his words direct at Black Ace. "That face of yours makes my trigger finger itchy." Black Ace looks up again, breathes hard, gets a hold on himself. "Don't like it myself," he says mild, "but do the best I can with it." Poison Pete feels he has the edge and starts crowding. "Bet even your mother couldn't stand that face. Probably took off in a hurry after one look." Black Ace crumples a card in his hand, then catches himself and straightens it out, careful. "Matter of fact," he says, "she did." Poison Pete is pushing in hard now. "Bet she mixed with a lot of men to produce a scrambled up fizz like that. Bet you don't even know who your father was." Black Ace stacks the whole deck together and rips it across in half and sets the torn deck on the table. "Matter of fact," he says, still mild, "you're right. But never worry who my father was. Just worry who I am myself." Poison Pete throws about for what to try next. "Those guns you're a-wearin'," he says. "Bet just for show. Bet you don't even know which end a bullet comes out." Black Ace stiffens and stands up. He's had himself and his folks mean-talked. He's taken that. But this young maverick has talked low about his guns, and that's one thing he can't take. He stalks to the swinging doors and pushes them wide. "Sandbur," he bellows. "Sandbur, you he-buzzard, get along down here fast." And up the street in the sheriff's office, old Sandbur stirs out of his early afternoon nap, and his gun's buckled on before he's blinked the sleep out of his eyes, and starts dog-trotting toward the saloon. He comes in puffing, and there's this Poison Pete strutting by the bar thinking he's made Black Ace Burton crawl. And there's Black Ace standing by the door, chewing a knuckle. "Sandber," says Black Ace, "ain't asked you a favor yet. Asking one now. Let me off that promise just a little part 1 second, so's I can eliminate this young nuisance that's been braying around here like an ornery jackass." Old Sandber looks at this Poison Pete, who's thinking sudden maybe now he'll have a shooting scuffle after all, and is dropping into a kind of crouch, with his head thrust forward and his arms out in half circles, with the hands clawed ready by his gun handles. Sandber shakes his head like he can't quite believe what he sees, and Black Ace speaks up again. "Sandber," he says, "this jackass has been prodding me something fierce. Look at him. Ever see a self-respecting gunfighter take a position like that?" And then Black Ace says what maybe he's never said to another man. "Please," he says. "Please, Sandber, let's kill him. Cart the carcass away myself so you won't have to bother any." And old Sandber looks at Poison Pete, and something tickles around in his mind, and he soars up somewhere to the heights of pure genius. Yep, that's when our Sandber does it. He prowls forward and pads soft in a circle around this Poison Pete, looking at him from every side. "Think you're good with those guns, eh?" he says. And Poison Pete snarls in his throat and tries to look tougher and glares around. "All right," Sandber says. "We'll give you a chance to prove it. Come along outside." He heads straight for the door and tips a wink at Black Ace, and Black Ace begins to get him and swings to follow. Poison Pete paws the floor some and snarls in his throat again, but there's nothing for him to do but follow too, which he does, muttering how he'll take them both on and fill them so full of lead it'll take 3 men to lift them into coffins. No need to mention the rest of us follow too. Men ain't been born, yet wouldn't. Sandber leads around back to that old barn and pushes the doors wide, and then we're all inside. Not much in there. Pile of old boards and a couple weird contraptions and plenty of space. Sandber picks the broadest board he can find and sets it upright at the other end of the barn. Takes a piece of chalk out of pocket and sketches quick on the board the outline of a man. Draws a little heart in the right place and comes to join the rest of us by the open doors. Poison Pete is looking disgusted, but Black Ace is grinning. He has old Sandber's complete now and is ready to play it the way he's likely the only... What the heck is that sentence? He has old Sandber's complete now and is ready to play it the way he's likely the only man could. "Ain't much of an artist," he says. "Forget to give that thing a face." He doesn't seem to more than shrug his shoulders a little, but his guns are in his hands, and both a roaring, and sudden 2 holes for eyes, and 2 close together for a nose, and 4 in a line for a mouth appear on the board, spaced just right in the chalk line head. There's a gulp from Poison Pete, but old Sandber just chuckles. "Too grim for my liking," he says. He gives that little wriggle, and his guns are in his hands, and both blast once, and 2 more holes appear, just tipping the mouth on each end, so it seems to turn up in kind of a grin. Poison Pete gulps again. But he's game and isn't going to be bluffed. He pulls a gun, and he's fair fast, but you can see him doing it, and he blasts at the board, and a hole shows in the middle of the figure there. "Belly button," he says. But Black Ace just shakes his head sorrowful. "Ain't polite," he says, "to make that chalk fella naked like that. Reckon he needs clothes." Out of somewhere, one of Black Ace's guns, reloaded, is in his right hand, and his left hand fans the hammer so fast the 6 shots are one long blast, and across the middle of the figure, where the belly button was, appears a line of holes, making a belt. Poison Pete seems to shrink some. He's forgetting to work at being big and tough. He chews a lip and shakes himself back to size. "If you're through playing games," he snarls, "let's get—" But old Sandburr has fixed him with a cold eye. "Boy," Sandburr says, "me and Black Ace has a regular date each day about this time to amuse ourselves here. You'll wait, and if you're still of a mind, then reckon I'll have to let Black Ace take care of you." He beckons to Black Ace, and the two of them take a stand with their backs to that board figure the length of the barn away. "Willie," Sandburr says, "when you feel the urge, call shoot." Willie Lord bugs his eyes and sudden starts to say shoot, and gets out the shoe part, but hasn't finished forming the oot part before old Sandburr and Black Ace have whirled, and each has a gun in a hand, and those guns have blasted, and a hole shows dead center in that chalk heart. And if you peer sharp, you can see it's a bit bigger than one bullet would make. "Yippee!" yells old Sandburr. That's one ready for burying. Acey, son, I've thought up a new one. Can you follow me on this?" His other guns popped into his other hand, and both start blasting, and holes appear in the lower left corner of the board, forming a neat letter R. Black Ace scratches his head with the barrel of the gun in his right hand and looks puzzled. Then a grin spreads through his black stubble, and his other gun pops into his other hand, and both start blasting, and a neat letter E shows next to the R. Then the two of them are at it, reloading and firing in rapid succession and alternating on the letters. In maybe a minute, they've spelled it out. Rest in peace. And then the two of them really cut loose. No sense telling all they do. Nobody'd believe, didn't see it. They'd do things like setting up a couple small boards with nails starting in them and racing each other, driving those nails clear in. They do things like fastening calendar sheets on the wall and taking turns with one calling out numbers in crazy order and the other shooting out those numbers as called. They do things like setting up a grooved plank on a slant with a nest of pool balls in a box at the top, with a little catch door on the box with a string tied to it, so each time the string's pulled, a ball pops out and rolls quick down the groove. Idea is for one to take the string and yank it whenever he has a mind, and the other stands there, guns holstered, and the instant a ball shows tries to draw and smack it before it reaches the floor. Old Sandburr knocks his balls off one after the other, and not a one gets past the 3-foot mark down the groove. Black Ace takes his stand and grins a bit devilish. "Aimin' for a record," he says, "and be eternal damned if he don't knock all but his last ball off ahead of the 2-foot mark, and that last one, which he misses, just nicking it a slice, he smacks with another bullet at about the 3.5-foot mark, and is just peeved enough to keep it poppin' all over the barn floor till he's emptied both guns." They do things like that, and others a man wouldn't dare tell, lest he be named a liar, till their gun barrels glow red, and you can smell the scorched leather of their holsters. And finally, old Sandburr calls enough. He sort of shakes himself back into realizing the rest of us are still there. Poison Pete is leaning limp against a support post. All the poison's long since oozed out of him. Now he isn't trying to look and be tough. He's a likable young galoot who's been shook so far down inside him he can't stand alone. Old Sandburr fixes him with a cold eye. "Seem to recall," he says, "some unfinished business was worrying you some." Poison Pete pushes out from his post and fights with himself till he can stand without wobbling. He stares at old Sandburr and he stares at Black Ace, and at last he gets his hanging lower jaw under control so he can close his mouth. Yep, Poison Pete makes his play then, and it's a good one. He pulls out his gun slow and easy so no one can mistake what he's doing, and he looks down at his hands and the guns in them, and he shakes his head and bends and lays the guns on the floor and straightens and walks over till he's in front of Black Ace. "Mr. Black Ace," he says, "I know when I'm beat, and not just in shooting. Can't call that face of yours handsome, but ready to admit things about it are mighty impressive. Now I've said my sorries, and I'm ready to do anything you say might square my foolishness." Black Ace looks at him and scratches at his stubble, and right then Black Ace does some soaring of his own. Looks over at old Sandburr and grins at what he's remembering and turns back to Poison Pete. "Son," he says, "there's something you can do. You can sign on as deputy with me and Sandburr here." Poison Pete jumps back a step. "Me?" he says. "Me be a sheriff's man?" Black Ace just grins. "It ain't so bad," he says. "Another thing, you'll promise me not to use those guns of yours on any man, 'less I say you can." Poison Pete twists his mouth like he's tasting bitter and throws his mind at this proposition and can't see any way out because he's give his word. He gulps and nods his head, and his face is long and disgusted. But old Sandburr and Black Ace note that disgusted look and close in on him. Sandburr is on one side. "You'll do plenty shooting, son," he says. "You've got the makings, just a kink or two in that draw of yours. Take them out easy, just tuck your elbows in and glide up smooth and curl your—" And Black Ace is on the other side. "Only thing wrong with your aiming," he says, "is your hands too tense. Hold firm without squeezing on the butt and flip your barrel like it was." And Poison Pete is bouncing his head from one to the other, young and eager and with a new kind of pride sprouting in him. That's my town. That's all you need to know about it, because it's only a few weeks and Poison Pete is living there like the rest of us, plain and peaceable, and giving old Sandburr and Black Ace a run for their money in that empty barn. Might say he leaves the student class and graduates the day he shows those two a stunt he's worked up all himself. Does it with empty whiskey bottles. Sets them on their sides on a rack he's made with the necks pointing toward him. Backs off. Gives a little combination wriggle and shrug that's his own brand now, and a gun's in his hand, and he works swift down the line of bottles, sending his bullets right through the open necks without nicking the glass, and blowing out the bottoms of the bottles behind. Sandburr looks at Black Ace, and Black Ace looks at Sandburr, and both lift their eyebrows, and both grin so foolish you'd think they've done it themselves. And that's the way things are going till the day this big-jawed rustler with red hair hits town. He's tired and dusty and full of meanness because he's had a hard 3 days shaking a posse down southwest somewhere. Too many of them for him to shoot it out, so he had to scat, and that's made him edgy and looking for a scuffle to give him a feeling of being back to size again. Climbs off his horse and loosens the 2 big guns in the low-cut holsters he wears kind of high on his hips, which is his style. Stalks into Willie Lord's and rakes his throat with the straight stuff and looks around for a likely. Mrs. Blackace and old Sandber playing casino at a side table. Sees Poison Pete inspecting pictures of tooled leather boots and a mail order catalog at the other end of the bar. Spots Pete's 2 guns and licks his lip. "Sonny boy," he says, "that's a lot of fancy hardware you're packing." Pete looks at him peeved at the Sonny boy business. Catches himself, grins pleasant. "Not so fancy," he says. "Just plain, ordinary, everyday sorts of guns." This rustler sticks his big jaw out. "Rawhide Red, that's me," he says. "Tough as rawhide, with a liking to see red blood running. Where I come from, we don't let little boys run around wearing guns like that." Pete holds tight to his temper. "Good notion," he says. "They might get hurt." This rustler ain't tired anymore. He's scenting what he wants. "Right," he says. "So if they don't show they can use 'em, we pop our little boys over our knees and paddle their cute little backsides." He pushes out his jaw till it's jutting like a rock ledge. So busy thinking Pete's quietness means he's scared, he doesn't notice the sound of a couple of chairs scraping the floor. Is some surprised when a long, lean, kind of double-jointed man and a brawny, black-stubbled other one prowl up and pat around him in circles, looking at him from all sides. "Think you're good with those guns, eh?" says Black Ace Burton. "We'll just give you a chance to prove it," says old Sandber. Sam Claggett, "Come along outside. You too, Petey's son. While you're at it, bring along some empty whiskey bottles." Yep, that's my town. That was a good one. I like that. The characters were really rich in that one. I guess we're never going to get that. How do I turn that off? Oh, for heaven's sakes. Cancel. Hold on. We'll just... Woo! Super big. Oh, I don't know how to fix it. Oh, that's crazy. Hold on. Maybe we can just... I was a giant. Were you scared? You should be scared. I hope I can watch this when it goes live and read your comments, because that was really funny. Especially after all that gun talk. You probably were scared, weren't you? You were scared. You didn't know what I was going to do next. You know I'm packing. That's all I've got for you today, guys. I hope you enjoyed the read. We will be back on Friday night or Friday afternoon. So come over and catch us at 4:30 Eastern on the Nurse Penny podcast. If you would like to support the show financially, you can look in the description section and you'll find my Venmo, Cash App, and PayPal links. If you'd prefer to send a check, I have some people that are fond of doing it that way. My email is in the description section as well, so you can email me and I'll give you my address if I don't think you're a serial killer, and you can send me a check. If I do think you're a serial killer, I'll give you somebody else's address that I don't like. Don't kill them, please. Anyway, that's all I've got for you. I'll pray us out. Heavenly Father, thank you for this day, and thank you for my Rumble family, my YouTube folks, my Twitter folks, my Facebook folks. I just thank you so much for each and every one and for the blessing that they are in my life. Father, I thank you so much for everybody who prays for me and for the show. That just touches my heart that people would take time out of their day to do that for me. Father, I also thank you for everybody who supports the show financially. That really helps so that we're not carrying all the cost of doing the show, and we really, really appreciate that. Father, I pray that you would bless everyone that's here today for any unspoken need that they have. You know the longings of our heart. You know the things that we need. You know where we're struggling and falling short and things that we're worried about. And I just pray that you would take those concerns and you would turn those into answered prayers, Father. and that we would use those answered prayers to glorify you. We thank you so much for this day, and most of all, we thank you for your son, Jesus. It's in his name we pray. Amen. All right, guys, that's all I've got for you. I will see you on Friday. I love you whole big bunches. Nurse Penny, out.